She sold our years for another man's promises.
The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers as I heard the screaming from inside the house. Not the good kind of screaming, the kind that makes your blood freeze and your stomach drop like a broken elevator. I was under the hood of my beat-up Dodge Charger, the one thing in my life that still made sense, when the sound cut through the October air like a chainsaw through silence. "Danny, get in here right now!" That was my wife Darla's voice, but it carried something I'd never heard before. Pure, unfiltered panic, mixed with what sounded like guilt. I wiped my hands on an old shop rag and jogged toward our modest two-story house in Millfield Heights, a neighborhood that used to be middle class before the steel mill closed, and everyone who could afford to leave did exactly that. The front door was wide open, which was weird because Darla obsessed over our heating bills. I stepped inside and froze. Our living room was packed with people, at least 20 of them, all staring at me, with expressions ranging from pity to barely concealed disgust. There was my mother-in-law, Verna Blackwood, looking like she'd just smelled something rotten. Her husband Don stood behind her like a well-dressed shadow. My boss Winston Carmichael was there too, his expensive suit making everyone else look shabby by comparison. Half the office seemed to be crammed into my living room, along with neighbors I barely knew, and Darla's college friends who usually pretended I didn't exist. "Surprise!" someone yelled half-heartedly, but the word died in the air like a deflated balloon. A homemade banner hung crooked across the archway. "Happy 37th birthday, Danny." The exclamation point looked like it was having second thoughts. "What the heck is this?" I asked, still holding the greasy rag. Darla appeared from the kitchen carrying a sheet cake that looked like it came from the grocery store's discount rack. Her blonde hair was perfect as always, not a strand out of place, and she wore that navy blue dress that made her look like a successful corporate executive instead of a guy's wife who worked in HR at the same company where he pushed papers in middle management. "It's your birthday party, honey," she said, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "I thought you'd be happy." I looked around the room again. These weren't my friends. Heck, most of these people actively avoided me at work. Terry Kowalski, my only real friend who owned Murphy's Bar down on Industrial Avenue, wasn't even here. Neither was anyone from the boxing gym where I spent most of my free time. "You invited Winston?" I asked, nodding toward my boss. Winston stepped forward with that politician's smile he'd perfected during his 20-year climb up the corporate ladder. He was one of those guys who looked like he'd been born in a three-piece suit, with silver hair that probably cost more to maintain than I made in a month. "Wouldn't miss it, Danny," he said, clapping me on the shoulder with a hand that had never done an honest day's work. 37 is a milestone. Time to start thinking about the future, making some changes. Something in his tone made my skin crawl. I'd worked for Carmichael Industries for 8 years, ever since the steel mill laid me off. I wasn't climbing any ladders. I was barely hanging on to the bottom rung, but I showed up every day and did my job. That should count for something. "Changes?" I asked. "Oh, Winston said, his eyes flicking toward Darla for just a split second. "Career moves, life decisions. Sometimes a man has to face reality about where he belongs." Verna Blackwood stepped forward, her Chanel perfume hitting me like a chemical tool. She was one of those old money types who'd never worked a day in her life, but somehow felt qualified to judge everyone else's choices. Her gray hair was pulled back in a bun so tight it probably gave her headaches, and she wore pearls like armor. "Daniel," she said, managing to make my name sound like a disease, "we need to talk about Darla's future, about what's best for everyone involved." "What's that supposed to mean?" Don Blackwood cleared his throat nervously. He was a thin, weak-chinned man who'd spent 40 years letting his wife make every decision. "Maybe we should have some cake first," he suggested. "No," I said, my voice getting harder. "I want to know what's going on. This doesn't feel like a birthday party. It feels like an intervention." The room went dead silent. I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen and Mrs. Patterson's dog barking next door. Everyone was looking at each other with those meaningful glances that people share when they all know something you don't. Darla set the cake down on our coffee table, the one we'd bought at a garage sale 3 years ago because we couldn't afford anything better. "Danny, please, let's just celebrate your birthday. We can talk about everything else later." Talk about what? That's when I saw it. Winston and Darla were standing close together, closer than a boss and employee should stand, and when she'd set down the cake, I'd noticed something that made my stomach turn to ice water. She wasn't wearing her wedding ring. "Where's your ring, Darla?" She looked down at her left hand like she'd never seen it before. Oh, I took it off to do the dishes. I must have forgotten to put it back on. But I knew my wife. She never took off her ring. She'd worn it through 3 jobs, 2 moves, and countless nights when we'd fought about money, about my career, about her mother's constant criticism. She wore it when she gardened, when she cleaned, when she cooked. The only time she took it off was to shower. I looked around the room again, really seeing it this time. These people weren't here to celebrate me. They were here to watch something happen, something they all knew about, except me. "Get out," I said quietly. "Danny," Darla started. "I said get out!" I shouted, loud enough to make Verna jump. "All of you! This is my house, and I want you gone! Now!" Winston stepped forward, his face hardening. "Now see here, Danny. There's no need to be unreasonable. We're all adults here. We can discuss this like civilized people." "Discuss what? What the heck is there to discuss?" That's when Verna decided to drop the bomb. "The fact that your wife has outgrown you, Daniel. The fact that she deserves better than this." She gestured around our modest living room with obvious disgust. "The fact that she's found someone who can give her the life she's always wanted." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I looked at Darla, waiting for her to deny it, to tell her mother to shut up, to defend our marriage and our life together. Instead, she looked at the floor. "Darla," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She finally looked up and I saw tears in her eyes. But they weren't tears of sadness or regret. They were tears of relief, like she'd been carrying a heavy weight and someone had finally taken it from her shoulders. "I'm sorry, Danny. I didn't want you to find out like this." The room started spinning like I'd been sucker punched by a heavyweight. I grabbed the back of our ratty couch to steady myself, my knuckles going white against the faded fabric. 20 pairs of eyes watched me like I was some kind of zoo animal having a breakdown for their entertainment. "Find out what exactly?" I managed to get the words out, though my throat felt like I'd been swallowing sandpaper. Winston stepped closer to Darla, and that's when I saw it, the way his hand brushed against hers, the way she leaned into him just slightly. It was subtle, but I'd been married to this woman for 12 years. I knew her body language better than I knew my own. "Daniel," Verna said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Darla and Winston have been seeing each other for several months now. They're in love. Real love, not the puppy dog infatuation you two had when you were young and foolish." The words hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. Several months. Not a one-night mistake or a moment of weakness. Months of planning, lying, sneaking around behind my back while I worked my A off to keep food on our table and a roof over our heads. "How long?" I asked Darla directly. She couldn't meet my eyes. "Danny, please, let's not do this here in front of everyone." "How freaking long, Darla?" "Language, Daniel," Verna snapped. "There's no need for vulgarity." I spun toward my mother-in-law, and she actually took a step back. Good. Maybe she was finally seeing something in me that wasn't the pushover she'd been walking all over for 12 years. "Lady, your daughter has been cheating on me with my boss, and you're worried about my language? Are you insane? Don't you dare speak to my wife that way." Don Blackwood finally found his voice, though it came out as more of a squeak than a roar. "Or what, Don? You'll write me a strongly worded letter. You'll have your lawyer send me a cease and desist order." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Your whole family is a joke? You've been looking down on me since the day I married your daughter? And now you're standing in my living room telling me she's been screwing around on me like it's some kind of business merger." Winston cleared his throat. "Danny, I think we all need to calm down and approach this rationally. What Darla and I have is special. It's not something we planned or wanted to happen. It just did. Oh, it just did." I turned to face him, and I saw something flicker in his eyes. Fear, maybe, or recognition that he might have pushed the wrong guy a little too far. "Like your Johnson just accidentally fell into my wife. Like she just accidentally forgot she was married?" "There's no need to be crude," he said, but his voice was less confident now. I looked around the room at all these people, my coworkers, neighbors, people I'd said hello to at the grocery store for years, and realized they'd all known. They'd been watching me walk around like an idiot while my wife and my boss carried on their affair, and not one of them had the decency to tell me. "How many of you knew?" I asked the room. Silence. "Come on, don't be shy now. You were all brave enough to show up for the big reveal. How many of you knew my wife was cheating on me?" Janet Morrison from accounting raised her hand slightly like she was afraid I might bite it off. Then Steve Chen from the warehouse. Then Mrs. Patterson from next door. One by one, hands went up until almost everyone in the room was admitting they'd known about the affair. Unbelievable, I said. Absolutely unreal. Danny, Darla said, finally finding her voice, I know you're hurt, but please try to understand. What Winston and I have, it's different. It's mature. It's based on more than just physical attraction and shared bills. Shared bills? The words came out like a growl. Is that what our marriage was to you? Shared bills? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean, Darla? Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you're saying 12 years of marriage, 12 years of me working my A off to build a life with you, was just some kind of financial arrangement. Winston stepped forward again, and I could see him trying to take control of the situation. That's what guys like him did. They managed problems, smoothed over difficulties, made everything neat and tidy. Look, Danny, I know this is difficult, but we're all adults here. These things happen. People grow apart, they change, they discover they want different things in life. There's no reason this has to get ugly. Ugly? I laughed again, and this time it was genuinely amused. Winston, you've been screwing my wife behind my back for months, and you're worried about things getting ugly? Brother, we passed ugly about 10 minutes ago. I understand you're upset. Upset? I cut him off. I'm not upset. Upset is when your team loses the playoffs. Upset is when your car breaks down on the way to work. This is rage. Pure, undiluted rage. The room was getting tenser by the second. I could see people edging toward the door, probably wondering if they should call the police or just make a run for it. But I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. So what's the plan here? I asked, looking back and forth between Darla and Winston. You two ride off into the sunset together? He divorces his wife, you divorce me, and you live happily ever after in his mansion up on Lakeside Drive? Winston's face went pale. How did I know you were married? I grinned, and it probably wasn't a pleasant sight. Because I'm not as stupid as you all think I am. Margaret Carmichael, isn't it? Your wife of 23 years? The one who's been posting pictures of your anniversary dinners on Facebook? Does she know about your mature, meaningful relationship with my wife? The silence in the room was deafening. Winston looked like he'd been punched in the stomach, and Darla's face had gone white as fresh snow. I thought not, I said. So let me get this straight. You've been cheating on your wife with my wife, and now you want me to just step aside gracefully while you figure out how to juggle two women. Is that about right? It's not like that, Darla said, but her voice was weak. Then what is it like? Please, enlighten me. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been playing house with a married man while I've been working 60-hour weeks to pay for this house, your car, your clothes, and everything else you need to maintain your lifestyle. Verna stepped forward again, her face flushed with anger. Daniel, you need to stop this right now. You're embarrassing yourself and everyone else in this room. I'm embarrassing myself? I turned to face her fully. Lady, your daughter has been cheating on me with a married man, and I'm the one who's embarrassing? What planet are you living on? You've never been good enough for her, Verna snapped, all pretense of civility gone. You've never been able to provide for her the way she deserves. You work in a dead-end job. You live in this pathetic little house, and you have no ambition whatsoever. Winston can give her everything she's always wanted. Everything except honesty, apparently. Don't you dare judge him, she said, her voice rising. He's a successful businessman, a pillar of the community. He has more class in his little finger than you have in your entire body. Class? I looked at Winston, who was trying to blend into the wallpaper. Is that what we're calling adultery now? Class? That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Several of my coworkers were smirking, not looking embarrassed or uncomfortable like normal people would in this situation. They were actually enjoying this. They were getting off on watching me get humiliated in my own living room. Mike Rodriguez from the shipping department was practically grinning. Sarah Webb from customer service was whispering something to Janet Morrison, and they both looked like they were watching their favorite soap opera. Even Tom Bradley, who I'd considered a friend, was watching with obvious amusement. You think this is funny? I asked the room. The smirks disappeared, but not quickly enough. You actually think this is entertaining? Watching a man find out his wife's been cheating on him? Danny, calm down, Tom said. But he was still fighting back a smile. Calm down? Tom, I thought we were friends. I've bought you beers, helped you move, listened to you complain about your ex-wife for hours, and you think my marriage falling apart is amusing? It's not that, he said, but he couldn't look me in the eye. It's just, come on, man. We all saw this coming. Darla's way out of your league. She always has been. It was only a matter of time before she figured it out. The words hit me like a physical blow. These weren't strangers or acquaintances. These were people I'd considered friends, people I'd trusted, people I'd shared parts of my life with, and they'd all been waiting for this moment, waiting for my marriage to implode so they could feel better about their own pathetic lives. Get out, I said quietly. What? Tom asked. I said get out. All of you. Right now. Danny, be reasonable, Winston said. We still need to discuss the practical matters. The divorce, the division of assets, the timeline. The timeline? I looked at him like he'd grown a second head. You've got a timeline for destroying my marriage? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean, Winston? Because it sounds like you and my wife have been planning this whole thing out like some kind of corporate takeover. Darla finally spoke up, and her voice was stronger now, more confident, like she'd found her footing again. Danny, we need to be adults about this. I'm going to file for divorce. I'm going to move out. We need to discuss how to divide our assets and debts. Our assets? I looked around the modest living room. What assets, Darla? The garage sale furniture, the 10-year-old TV, the car that's held together with duct tape and prayer? The house, she said. We need to sell the house. And there it was. The real reason for this whole charade. She didn't just want to leave me for Winston. She wanted to cash out, take half of everything I'd worked for, and start fresh with her rich boyfriend. Over my dead body, I said. The words hung in the air like a challenge, and I could see Winston's face harden. He wasn't used to people telling him no, especially not someone he considered beneath him on the social food chain. Now, Danny, he said, his voice taking on that condescending tone he used when he was about to fire someone. Let's not make this more difficult than it needs to be. Darla has every right to her share of the marital assets. That's how divorce works. Marital assets? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Winston, I put the down payment on this house with money I saved working double shifts at the steel mill. I've made every mortgage payment for 8 years while your girlfriend here spent her paychecks on designer clothes and spa treatments. She wants to leave? Fine. But she's not taking half of what I've built. Verna stepped forward, her face red with indignation. Daniel, you can't be serious. Darla has been a devoted wife for 12 years. She's entitled to half of everything you've accumulated during the marriage. Devoted? The word came out like a curse. She's been screwing my boss for months, and you call that devoted? She made one mistake, Verna said. One moment of weakness with a man who actually appreciates her worth. One moment? I turned to Darla. Tell her, Darla. Tell your mother how long this has been going on. Darla's face went pale again, and she looked at Winston like she was asking for permission to speak. That look told me everything I needed to know about their relationship. She'd traded one man for another, but she was still looking for someone to make her decisions. It doesn't matter how long, Winston said. What matters is that we handle this situation like civilized adults. Danny, I'm prepared to make you a very generous offer. An offer? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You're going to make me an offer? For what exactly? For your cooperation. For making this transition as smooth as possible for everyone involved. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. I've had my lawyer draw up some papers. A settlement agreement that I think you'll find more than fair. I stared at the envelope like it was a snake. You came to my birthday party with divorce papers? Not divorce papers, he said quickly. A financial settlement. A way to make sure everyone comes out of this situation in good shape. Let me see that. He handed me the envelope, and I tore it open. Inside were several pages of legal documents, but the number at the bottom of the first page jumped out at me like a neon sign. $50,000. $50,000? I looked up at Winston. You're offering me $50,000 to what exactly? To walk away quietly, to not contest the divorce, to not make things difficult for Darla or for me. I read further down the page, and the terms became clearer. In exchange for $50,000, I would agree to an uncontested divorce, give up any claim to alimony or spousal support, and agree not to discuss the circumstances of the divorce with anyone, including the media or Darla's employer. This is a non-disclosure agreement, I said. Among other things, yes. You want to pay me hush money? Winston's face flushed slightly. I prefer to think of it as a mutually beneficial arrangement. You get a fresh start with some money in your pocket, and Darla gets to move on with her life without unnecessary drama. I looked around the room at all these people who'd been watching me like I was some kind of entertainment, and something inside me finally snapped. Not in a violent way, but in a way that felt like chains breaking. You know what, Winston? You're right. This should be handled like civilized adults. So let me respond to your generous offer in a civilized manner. I took the settlement papers and tore them in half. Then I tore the halves in half. Then I kept tearing until the pieces were too small to tear anymore, and I let them fall to the floor like confetti. There's my answer. Winston's face went from flush to deep red. Danny, you're making a mistake. This is a one-time offer. If you force this to go through the courts, it's going to get ugly for everyone involved. Ugly for who, exactly? You? The married man who's been having an affair with his employee? Or Darla, the woman who's been cheating on her husband with her boss? Because from where I'm standing, I'm not the one who should be worried about things getting ugly. You don't understand, Verna said, her voice shrill. Winston has connections. He has influence. He can make your life very difficult if you don't cooperate. Are you threatening me? I'm stating facts. Winston is a powerful man in this community. He sits on the hospital board, the Chamber of Commerce, the country club membership committee. He has friends in the city government, the police department, the courthouse. If you try to fight this, you'll lose. I looked at Winston, and he had the grace to look uncomfortable with his mother-in-law's threats, but he didn't deny them. So that's how it is, I asked him. You screw my wife, destroy my marriage, and then threaten to use your connections to ruin my life if I don't go along quietly. Nobody's threatening anyone, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Really? Because it sure sounds like a threat to me. It sounds like you're saying I should take your money and disappear, or you'll use your influence to make sure I can't find work in this town. The room had gone dead silent. Even the people who'd been smirking earlier were looking uncomfortable now. This had gone way beyond entertainment into something darker and more serious. Tom Bradley cleared his throat. Maybe we should all just calm down and— Shut up, Tom, I said without looking at him. You lost the right to give me advice when you decided my marriage was a joke. I turned back to Winston and Darla. Here's what's going to happen. Darla, if you want a divorce, you can have one, but you're not getting half of anything. You want to leave me for him? Fine. But you're leaving with exactly what you brought to this marriage. That's not legal, Verna protested. Actually, it might be. See, I've been doing some reading since I started suspecting something was going on, and it turns out that adultery is still grounds for divorce in this state. It also turns out that adultery can affect the division of marital property, especially when the cheating spouse has been spending marital funds on their affair. Darla's face went white. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the hotel bills I found in your purse last week, the ones from the Lakeside Inn, charged to our joint credit card. I'm talking about the expensive lingerie I found hidden in your closet, the stuff you never wore for me. I'm talking about the restaurant charges, the wine, the gifts you've been buying for your boyfriend with my money. Winston looked like he'd been sucker punched. Darla, you told me you were paying for those things yourself. I was going to pay you back, she stammered. With what money? You've been spending both our paychecks on your affair while I've been eating peanut butter sandwiches for lunch to make ends meet. The room was spinning out of control now. What had started as a birthday party ambush was turning into a full-scale meltdown, with accusations flying and relationships exploding in real time. Furthermore, I continued, I think Winston's wife might be very interested to know where her husband has been spending his evenings. And I think the board of directors at Carmichael Industries might have some questions about their CEO having an affair with an employee. That's a serious breach of professional boundaries, isn't it? Or at the very least, a massive liability for the company. Winston stepped forward, and for the first time since this whole thing started, he looked genuinely dangerous. Danny, you don't want to go down that road. Trust me. Are you threatening me again? I'm warning you. You have no idea what you're messing with. You have no idea how far I'm willing to go to protect what's mine. What's yours? I looked at Darla, who was standing between us like a prize in some twisted game. She's not yours, Winston. She's not anybody's. She's a grown woman who made a choice, and now she gets to live with the consequences. The consequences? Darla found her voice again. Danny, what are you talking about? I smiled, and I could see it made everyone in the room nervous. Good. It was about time they realized I wasn't the pushover they thought I was. I'm talking about the fact that I've been documenting everything for weeks. Every hotel bill, every unexplained absence, every lie you've told me about working late or going out with girlfriends. I've got a paper trail that would make an accountant weep with joy. You've been spying on me? I've been protecting myself, and it's a good thing, because I'm going to need all that documentation when I file for divorce on grounds of adultery and financial misconduct. Winston's face was getting redder by the minute. You can't prove anything, can I? I reached into my back pocket and pulled out my phone. Funny thing about modern technology, Winston. These little devices can record conversations, take pictures, even track locations, and they can store months of data without anyone knowing. The color drained from his face. You recorded us? I recorded my wife in my house, which is perfectly legal in this state, by the way. One-party consent and all that. I could see the wheels turning in his head as he tried to remember every conversation he'd had with Darla in this house, every intimate moment they'd shared while they thought I was at work or at the gym. You're bluffing, Darla said, but her voice was shaking. I held up my phone and pressed play. Her voice came through the speaker, clear as day. Danny's working late again tonight. He won't be home until after midnight. We can have the whole evening together. Then Winston's voice. Are you sure he doesn't suspect anything? He's clueless. He trusts me completely. We could probably do it right in front of him and he wouldn't notice. Both of them laughing. I stopped the recording and looked around the room. The silence was so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. Still think I'm bluffing? The recording hit the room like a bomb going off in a library. You could practically hear people's relationships with each other reshuffling in real time. The coworkers who'd been smirking at my humiliation were now looking at Winston and Darla like they'd just watched them kick a puppy. Sarah Webb from customer service was the first to break. Oh my God, Darla, how could you say something like that about your own husband? You don't understand, Darla started, but her voice was weak and defensive now. I understand perfectly, Sarah shot back. You've been cheating on Danny and laughing about it behind his back. That's disgusting. Mike Rodriguez stepped away from the group near the wall. Man, I thought this was just about you two growing apart or something. I didn't know you were making fun of him. We weren't making fun, Winston started. Bees, Mike cut him off. I heard what I heard. You were both laughing about how clueless he was while you were screwing around in his house. I watched the room divide in real time. The people who'd been enjoying my humiliation were now backing away from Winston and Darla like they had something contagious. Even some of the neighbors were shaking their heads in disgust. But not everyone. Verna Blackwood stood her ground, her face set in hard lines of determination. This doesn't change anything, she announced to the room. So what if they had a few private conversations? Darla still deserves better than this. She gestured around my living room with obvious disdain. She deserves a man who can provide for her, who can give her the life she's always wanted. What she deserves, said a voice from the doorway, is a good, swift kick in the backside. Everyone turned to see Terry Kowalski standing in my front door, all 6'3" and 250 pounds of him. Terry owned Murphy's Bar and looked like he'd been carved out of granite by someone who didn't believe in smooth edges. He was wearing his usual uniform of jeans, work boots, and a flannel shirt that had seen better decades. Terry, I said, and I couldn't hide the relief in my voice. Finally, someone who was actually on my side. Sorry I'm late, Danny, he said, stepping into the room and making everyone else look smaller by comparison. I got your message about the party, but I was dealing with the situation at the bar. His eyes swept the room, taking in the tension, the divided groups, the torn papers on the floor. Looks like I missed the fun part. You didn't miss much, I said. Just my wife and my boss explaining how they've been having an affair for months while I was too stupid to notice. Terry's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. He'd been married once, long ago, and his wife had cheated on him with his business partner. It had cost him half his bar and most of his faith in human nature. Is that right? He said, looking directly at Winston. Winston straightened up, trying to project authority, but he looked like a boy trying to stare down a grizzly bear. This is a private family matter. I don't think it concerns you. Well, see, that's where you're wrong, Terry said, his voice calm and conversational. Danny's been my friend for 15 years. He was the best man at my wedding. He helped me rebuild the bar after the fire in '09. And he's never once asked me for anything he didn't earn. So when someone hurts my friend, it becomes my concern. The room was getting more tense by the second. Terry had a reputation in the neighborhood as someone you didn't want to cross. He'd been a Marine before he bought the bar, and he still carried himself like someone who could handle whatever trouble came through his door. Nobody wants any trouble, Winston said, but he took a step back. Trouble? Terry smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Mister, you've been screwing your employee behind her husband's back for months. You came to his house with legal papers trying to buy him off like he's some kind of problem you can make disappear. And you're worried about trouble? It's not like that, Darla said, but her voice was barely above a whisper. Terry turned his attention to her, and she actually flinched. Darla, I've known you for 12 years. I was at your wedding. I watched you promise to love, honor, and cherish this man through better or worse, richer or poorer, in sickness and in health. You remember those words? Things change, she said defensively. Yeah, they do. People get sick. They lose jobs. They struggle. That's when you find out what your promises are worth. And apparently yours aren't worth crap. Verna stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. How dare you speak to my daughter that way? You're nothing but a common barkeeper. You have no right to judge her choices. Terry looked at Verna like she was something he'd scrape off his boot. Lady, I've been serving drinks to working people for 20 years. I've seen every kind of human behavior there is. And I can tell you that your daughter's behavior is about as low as it gets. She's been lying to her husband, stealing from their joint accounts to pay for her affair, and making fun of him behind his back. In my book, that makes her trash, no matter how much money her family has. How dare you? How dare I what? Tell the truth? Point out that your daughter is a cheating, lying piece of work who's been playing house with a married man while her husband worked his tail off to pay for her lifestyle? The room erupted. Verna started screaming about lawsuits and slander. Don tried to calm her down while looking like he wanted to disappear into the wallpaper. Winston was trying to regain control of the situation while Darla stood there looking like she'd been slapped. But the most interesting thing was watching my coworkers. The ones who'd been on Winston and Darla's side were now looking uncomfortable and uncertain. The ones who'd been neutral were starting to move toward my side of the room. And the ones who'd already turned against the affair were getting more vocal in their support. Terry's right, Sarah Webb said, her voice cutting through the chaos. This is disgusting. Darla, I thought you were better than this. We all did, added Janet Morrison. Danny's a good guy. He doesn't deserve this. Even Tom Bradley, who'd been smirking earlier, looked ashamed now. Danny, man, I'm sorry. I didn't know it was this bad. I thought you two were just having problems. But not everyone was switching sides. A few of Winston's management team were still standing with him, probably because they were afraid of what would happen to their jobs if they didn't. And Verna was still defending her daughter like she was some kind of victim, instead of the architect of this whole mess. This is ridiculous, she announced to the room. Darla made a mistake, but that doesn't give any of you the right to judge her. She's trying to fix her life, to find happiness with a man who can actually provide for her. By destroying her marriage and breaking her husband's heart, Terry asked. By facing reality, Verna shot back. Daniel has never been good enough for her. He's never had any ambition, any drive to better himself. He's content to work in a dead-end job and live in this pathetic little house while Darla dreams of something better. Something better? I found my voice again. Like what, Verna? Like being the mistress of a married man? Like sneaking around hotel rooms and lying to everyone she knows? That's your idea of something better? Winston is going to leave his wife, she said defiantly. Is he? I looked at Winston, who suddenly looked like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. Winston, are you going to leave Margaret? Are you going to divorce your wife of 23 years to marry my wife? The silence stretched out like a guitar string about to snap. Winston looked at Darla, then at Verna, then at the floor. It's complicated, he finally said. Complicated? Darla's voice was sharp now with an edge of panic. What do you mean, complicated? You said you loved me. You said we were going to be together. I do love you, he said, but he still wouldn't meet her eyes. But Margaret, the divorce, it would be very expensive, very public. It could affect my position at the company. And there it was. The truth that everyone in the room could see except maybe Darla. Winston had been playing her, stringing her along with promises he never intended to keep. He wanted to have his affair and keep his marriage, his reputation, and his money. "You son of a witch," Darla said, and for the first time since this whole thing started, I actually felt sorry for her. "You told me you were going to leave her. You told me we were going to be together." "We can still be together," he said quickly, "just not officially, not right away. These things take time." "These things take time?" She was getting louder now, and I could see years of frustration and disappointment boiling over. "How much time, Winston? Another 6 months, another year, another decade while I wait for you to grow a backbone and leave your wife?" "Darla, please, not here." Not in front of everyone. But it was too late. The dam had burst and everything was pouring out. "Not in front of everyone," she screamed. "You brought everyone here. You wanted to make this public. You wanted to humiliate my husband in front of all these people, and now you're embarrassed?" The room was transfixed. This was better than any soap opera, watching these 3 lives implode in real time, but I wasn't enjoying it anymore. I was just tired. Tired of the drama, tired of the lies, tired of being the entertainment for people who didn't really care about any of us. "That's enough," I said quietly, but somehow my voice cut through all the shouting. Everyone turned to look at me. I said, "That's enough. All of you, get out of my house, now." "Danny," Darla started, tears streaming down her face. "No, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear any more explanations or excuses or justifications. I want all of you out of my house right now." "We still need to discuss," Winston began. "We don't need to discuss anything. You want my wife? You can have her. But you're not getting my house, you're not getting my money, and you're not getting my cooperation. If you want a divorce, Darla, you can file for one, but you're going to get exactly what you deserve, which is nothing." "That's not legal," Verna protested. "We'll let the lawyers figure out what's legal," I said, "but I can tell you what's right, and what's right is that a cheating wife doesn't get rewarded for destroying her marriage." Terry stepped up beside me, a show of solidarity that meant more than he probably knew. "You heard him. Party's over. Time to go." One by one, they filed out. Some of my coworkers stopped to apologize or offer support. Others just left quietly, probably already planning how they were going to tell this story to everyone who hadn't been here to see it. Winston was one of the last to leave, and he stopped at the door to look back at me. "This isn't over, Danny," he said. "Yes, it is," I replied. "It's been over for months. I just didn't know it yet." He left, and Darla started to follow him, then stopped and turned back. "Danny, don't," I said. "Just don't. Whatever you're going to say, I don't want to hear it." She stood there for a moment, looking like she wanted to say something else, then followed Winston out the door. Verna was the last to leave, and she couldn't resist one final shot. "This isn't over, Daniel. Darla is still entitled to half of everything, and we have lawyers who will make sure she gets it." "Bring them on," I said. "I've got lawyers, too. And I've got evidence. Let's see how that works out for you." She left, slamming the door behind her. And then it was just Terry and me, standing in my living room with the remains of my birthday cake and my marriage scattered around us like the aftermath of a tornado. "Heck of a party," Terry said. I started laughing, and once I started, I couldn't stop. I laughed until my sides hurt and tears were running down my face. I laughed at the absurdity of it all, at the melodrama, at the fact that my life had just imploded in front of 20 witnesses, and somehow I felt better than I had in months. "You okay?" Terry asked. "Yeah," I said, wiping my eyes. "I think I am. For the first time in a long time, I think I'm actually okay." 3 weeks later, I was sitting in Terry's bar nursing a beer and reading the local newspaper when the story broke. Page 3 of the Millfield Gazette, right between the high school football scores and the city council meeting minutes. Local CEO resigns amid harassment allegations. The article was brief but devastating. Winston Carmichael had resigned his position as CEO of Carmichael Industries following an investigation into allegations of inappropriate workplace behavior and misconduct involving employees. The company's board of directors had voted unanimously to accept his resignation and had hired an outside firm to conduct a full review of the company's workplace policies. "Well, I'll be darned," Terry said, reading over my shoulder. "Looks like your boy Winston got what was coming to him." I took a sip of my beer and smiled. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. The truth was, I hadn't had anything to do with Winston's downfall. After the birthday party disaster, word had spread through the company faster than a flu outbreak. Turns out, Darla wasn't Winston's first inappropriate relationship with an employee. She wasn't even his second. Once people started talking, 3 other women came forward with stories of inappropriate advances, promises of promotions in exchange for intimate favors, and threats of retaliation when they refused his advances. The board had no choice but to act. Winston was a liability the company couldn't afford, especially in the current climate where workplace misconduct lawsuits could cost millions and destroy reputations overnight. "What about Darla?" Terry asked. "What about her?" "The paper says several employees were terminated as part of the investigation." I hadn't seen that part. I read further down the article, and there it was. 3 employees were terminated for their involvement in the incidents, and 2 others resigned voluntarily. Darla had been fired. After 12 years with the company, she was out of a job with no prospects and no references. Her affair with Winston hadn't just cost her a marriage. It had cost her career. "Wow," I said, but I didn't feel sorry for her. She'd made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my lawyer, Jennifer Martinez, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who specialized in divorce cases and had a reputation for being tougher than a $2 steak. "Settlement conference tomorrow at 2 p.m. Bring all documentation. This should be interesting." JM. I'd hired Jennifer the day after the birthday party, and she'd been worth every penny. She'd taken one look at my evidence, the recordings, the financial records, the hotel bills, and smiled like a shark smelling blood in the water. "This is going to be fun," she'd said. The settlement conference was held in a sterile conference room at Jennifer's law firm downtown. Darla showed up with her lawyer, a nervous-looking guy named Peterson who kept checking his watch like he had somewhere better to be. Verna was there too, of course, dressed like she was attending a funeral and looking like she'd been sucking on lemons. I brought Terry for moral support, and Jennifer had her paralegal there to take notes. "Let's get right to the point," Peterson said once everyone was seated. "My client is seeking an equitable division of marital assets, including the family home, vehicles, and retirement accounts." Jennifer smiled and opened a thick folder. "Your client is seeking to profit from her own adultery. That's not going to happen." "Adultery is not grounds for denying spousal support in this state," Peterson replied. "Actually, it is when the adulterous spouse has been using marital funds to support their affair." Jennifer slid a stack of papers across the table. Hotel bills, restaurant charges, gifts, lingerie, all purchased with money from joint accounts for the purpose of conducting an extramarital affair. That's financial misconduct, and it absolutely affects the division of assets. Peterson's face went pale as he flipped through the documents. "This is extensive." "Oh, we're just getting started." Jennifer opened another folder. "We also have recorded conversations in which Mrs. Cooper admits to the affair and makes disparaging comments about her husband. We have testimony from multiple witnesses who can confirm the timeline and nature of the affair, and we have evidence that Mrs. Cooper's lover made promises of financial support that he has since failed to deliver." Darla spoke for the first time since we'd sat down. "What do you mean, failed to deliver?" "I mean, Winston Carmichael has cut off all contact with you since his resignation, hasn't he? No more expensive dinners, no more hotel rooms, no more promises about leaving his wife. You've been abandoned by the man you destroyed your marriage for." Darla's face crumpled, and I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "That's not relevant to the division of marital assets," Peterson said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Actually, it's very relevant. Mrs. Cooper entered into this affair under the assumption that she would be financially supported by her lover. She made financial decisions based on that assumption, including spending marital funds on the affair. Now that support has disappeared, she's looking to her husband to subsidize the consequences of her poor choices." Verna finally spoke up. "This is outrageous. Darla is entitled to half of everything they accumulated during the marriage." Jennifer turned her attention to Verna, and I could see why she had such a fearsome reputation. "Mrs. Blackwood, are you representing your daughter in this proceeding? Because if you are, you need to be sworn in as counsel. If you're not, then you need to be quiet and let the lawyers handle this." "I'm her mother. I have every right to—" "You have the right to remain silent and let your daughter's attorney do his job, or you can leave. Your choice." Verna looked like she'd been slapped, but she shut up. Peterson tried to regain control of the room. "Look, let's be reasonable here. My client made some poor choices, but that doesn't mean she should be left destitute. She's unemployed, she has no income, and she needs somewhere to live. She can live with her parents, Jennifer replied, or she can find a job and support herself like an adult. What she can't do is profit from her own misconduct. What exactly are you proposing? Peterson asked. Jennifer slid another document across the table. Mr. Cooper keeps the house, his retirement accounts, and his vehicle. Mrs. Cooper gets her personal belongings, her own retirement account, and her vehicle. No alimony, no spousal support, no division of assets acquired through Mr. Cooper's sole income. Peterson looked at the document like it was written in a foreign language. This is completely one-sided. No judge would approve this. Want to bet? Jennifer opened yet another folder. I have 3 similar cases from the past 2 years where adultery and financial misconduct resulted in the innocent spouse retaining most or all of the marital assets. The precedent is clear. The room went quiet, except for the sound of Peterson flipping through pages and occasionally muttering under his breath. Darla was staring at the table, tears running down her cheeks. Verna looked like she was about to explode. Finally, Peterson looked up. We need time to review this and consult with our client. Take all the time you need, Jennifer said, but understand that this offer expires in 72 hours. After that, we go to trial, and I can guarantee that will be much more expensive and much more public than anyone wants. Are you threatening us? Verna demanded. I'm explaining the reality of the situation. A trial means depositions, witness testimony, public records. It means your daughter's affair, her financial misconduct, and her abandonment by her lover all become matters of public record. It means the local newspaper gets to write follow-up stories about the workplace misconduct scandal at Carmichael Industries and the employee who was having an affair with the disgraced CEO. Darla looked up for the first time, her face streaked with mascara. Danny, please. We were married for 12 years. That has to count for something. I looked at her across the table. This woman I'd loved and trusted and built a life with and felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not regret. Just nothing. It did count for something, I said quietly. It counted for 12 years of me working my tail off to build a life together. It counted for 12 years of me being faithful and honest and committed to our marriage. But apparently it didn't count for anything to you. I made a mistake. You made a choice. You chose to have an affair. You chose to lie to me for months. You chose to spend our money on your lover. You chose to humiliate me in front of our friends and neighbors. Those weren't mistakes, Darla. Those were choices, and choices have consequences. Peterson cleared his throat. We'll need to discuss this with our client and get back to you. 72 hours, Jennifer reminded him. After that, the offer is off the table. They left, Verna muttering threats and complaints, Peterson looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, and Darla looking back over her shoulder like she wanted to say something else. After they were gone, Jennifer leaned back in her chair and smiled. That went better than I expected. Think they'll take the deal? They'd be idiots not to. If this goes to trial, your wife is going to get destroyed. Her affair, her financial misconduct, her abandonment by her lover, it's all going to come out. And judges don't like cheating spouses who try to profit from their own bad behavior. Terry clapped me on the shoulder. Looks like you're going to come out of this just fine. Better than fine, Jennifer added. You're going to come out ahead. Your wife thought she could trade up to a richer man and take half your assets with her. Instead, she's lost her job, her lover, and her marriage, and she's going to walk away with almost nothing. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt like I'd won some kind of victory. Instead, I just felt tired and ready for this whole mess to be over. What happens now? I asked. Now we wait, Jennifer said. 72 hours, and then we'll know whether this ends quietly or whether we go to war. 2 days later, Peterson called to accept the settlement. Darla would get her personal belongings, her car, and her small retirement account. Everything else stayed with me. No alimony, no spousal support, no ongoing financial obligations. The divorce was finalized 3 weeks later in a brief hearing that lasted less than 10 minutes. Darla didn't even show up. She'd moved back in with her parents and was apparently looking for work in another city, trying to start over somewhere people didn't know about her affair with the disgraced CEO. I walked out of the courthouse a free man, legally and emotionally. The marriage that had defined my adult life was over, but instead of feeling like an ending, it felt like a beginning. Terry was waiting for me on the courthouse steps. "How do you feel?" "Relieved," I said, and realized I meant it. For the first time in months, I feel like I can breathe again. What's next? I looked around at the city I'd lived in my whole life, the place where everyone knew my story, where I'd always be the guy whose wife left him for his boss. It was time for a change. "I'm thinking about taking that job offer in Denver," I said. Terry raised an eyebrow. "The construction management position?" "Yeah. Fresh start, new city, better money. Why not?" "Because this is your home. Your friends are here. Your life is here." "My life was here, but that life is over now. Time to build a new one." We walked down the courthouse steps together, and I felt lighter with every step. Behind me was 12 years of marriage, 8 years of a dead-end job, and 37 years of being the guy everyone underestimated. Ahead of me was possibility. 6 months later, I was living in a 2-bedroom apartment in downtown Denver, managing construction projects for a company that appreciated my experience and work ethic. I'd lost 30 pounds, learned to cook something besides microwave dinners, and started dating a woman named Lisa, who was a nurse at the local hospital and had never heard of Winston Carmichael or Darla Cooper. I got updates from Terry occasionally. Winston had moved to Florida after his divorce was finalized, reportedly paying his ex-wife a settlement that cost him most of his assets. Darla was working as a receptionist at a dental office in Pittsburgh, living in a studio apartment and driving a 10-year-old Honda. Verna had stopped speaking to most of her former friends after the scandal, and Don had reportedly started drinking heavily. I felt no satisfaction in their misfortunes. I felt nothing at all. They were part of a life I'd left behind, characters in a story that had ended badly for everyone involved. The only person who came out ahead was me, and that was because I'd finally learned the most important lesson of my adult life. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. I never saw any of them again.